Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Week 2 of the Record Searchlight Prep Football Preview Show. My name is Jeffrey Jen, sports reporter for the RS. At my side is T.J. Holmes, prep reporter for the Record Searchlight. And we're here to discuss about the current scene of prep football heading into this week's games. Before we do, let's give quick thoughts about last week, what we stood out in mind. So I'll kick over to you.
Well, the first thing that stands out is Foothill's win over Deer Valley. I mean, it was 30-19, but that was just such a big win for the northern section. You know, Paradise even had a big win right after that against Edison. So, I mean, those are just two big wins for the northern section that could come handily at the end of the year.
What does it say about Foothill that they beat Team Deer Valley that handed Paradise their only loss last week? How much does that help their confidence, and how much does that kind of Paradise has to think about, gee, they be a team we lost to?
Well, Foothill winning that game, you know, they picked up a couple good things. They're actually able to handle adversity pretty well. You know, they were really close at halftime, really close in the third quarter until, you know, they were losing in the third quarter until Tucker Wilson hooked up with Cooper Janisevsky's and for those two touchdowns. So, I mean, they've handled adversity pretty well, but the score could have been a little bit more in their favor if they didn't commit a couple penalties.
Still, it was an impressive win. For me, I was at the West Valley Shasta game, and the Eagles won 34-27, and that was even with Shasta returning two kickoff returns for touchdowns. I have to say the Eagles definitely look impressive in that victory. They look like they won't not only make the D1 playoffs, but they are going to be a serious factor there. They're probably 1 of 4 teams, along with Foothill, Enterprise, and Paradise, that you have to say they may be title contenders.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, especially going into that, and two of those names that you just spoke of are actually our game of the week with West Valley Enterprise. What are some thoughts on going into that game? What are some keys for that game for these two teams?
Well, to me, the key is going to be the West Valley running offense. They run very well out of the fly. They gained 238 yards against Shasta. And the revamped Enterprise run defense. Run offense and run defense were weaknesses for Enterprise down year last year. They seem to have corrected those issues, though they did give up some big plays to Anderson last week. However, how well Enterprise can stop or at least hinder West Valley will go a long way to determine the game. West Valley has shown a better use of play-action pass. Luke Wright, he's got a couple good receivers on Hunter Deitch and Colton Strickland, big targets downfield. And if West Valley can run the ball, then that sets up the pass, and the Eagles will be a pretty tough offensive juggernaut to stop at that point.
Yeah, and, you know, on the flip side, they're also going to have to stop Enterprise and Alex Henderson, who had the second best game in Hornet history for a single individual offensive performance. 382 yards of total offense, over 200 yards passing, over 100 yards rushing, 5 total touchdowns he was a part of. That's a big game.
West Valley, they're probably pretty good defensively. That's usually what they're hanging their hats on. And they'll have a tough matchup. I'm actually more concerned about West Valley defending the faster, speedier players such as Enterprise running back Brad Woods, those speed receivers, because they gave up a couple long plays to Shasta. And Enterprise, they seem to show that they have the breakaway ability, as well as dink and dunk and go on long drives. So it's going to be interesting matchup, both sides, tough defensive assignments both ways. So,
and it's a big matchup early in the season.
Both Greg Grandel and Darren Trueblood, the head coach of the game, alluded to that. Right after the Shasta game, Grandel says it's a D1 game and we have to win all of them for playoff purposes. So even though this is only week 2, both teams are thinking about playoff points, where they stack up in terms of seeding. You know, Enterprise, they definitely also would like to get revenge on West Valley for last year's loss.
And I was at that game last year when Alex Henderson threw that pick 6 with under 30 seconds left. So there's no doubt about it, the Enterprise is going to be hungry, and they want this game.
The other side is Shasta at Red Bluff. And that actually is an interesting one because Red Bluff, they hung tough with Pleasant Valley, 17-13 at home. If speaking of pick sixes, PV returned a pick six right before halftime for a touchdown, and that, as John Miller, the Spartans head coach, said, that was the difference of the game. So my thoughts on that game is it's going to be won in the trenches. Red Bluff seems to have improved under their second year under Miller, and the big issue about Shasta is they have the skill position players, they seem to have the speed, but their offensive line is a work in progress. Their defensive line is, at this point, not quite what it's been in a typical werewolf defense. So if Red Bluff can take advantage of those weaknesses, at least perceived weaknesses, then they have a chance for an upset.
Well, my special X factor for this game is going to be special teams, because as it is the third aspect of the game, it is very important. And Shasta's had 3 special teams touchdowns on kickoff returns in 2 games so far this year, with Cody Lunsford having 2 and Steven Johnson having another. So that's a major factor that a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah, it would be interesting how John Miller and his coaching staff, what they do on kickoffs and punts, and see whether they kick away from those guys like Cody Lunsford and Steven Johnson. Foothill, we go back to the Cougars. They are going to be on the road at River Valley. The Falcons are 1-1 this season. They beat Lyndhurst 23-17, but last week they lost to Sutter 42-21.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
And Sutter, though, they blanked West Valley. So what do you see in this game?
Well, Foothill's so balanced offensively that they can go either way. They can air it out, and they got the playmakers to do that. And they also have Tevin Slayton and Addison Gillum to run it between the tackles and outside. And so far, Tevin's carrying his side of the load pretty well. And Addison Gillum hasn't been used that much on the offensive side, but in crucial situations on tough yardage or even near the goal line. So, I mean, those are two players that are going to be hard to stop. That whole offense is so dynamic that it's so balanced and so dynamic that they're going to get their yards and they're going to put up points, and it's going to be against everyone.
The way I see it, Foothill should win as long as they don't fall into the trap of, right after big victories such as over Deer Valley, they need to get right back onto the saddle and come and play the game. Otherwise, you never know what happens. That's why you play the games.
Exactly.
Moving on, we are going to talk about other EL games real briefly. Redwood at Paradise, PV at Gridley, LP at Chico, and Wasson actually has the bye. And then we move over to the NAL, and last week you were at Trinity at Central Valley. CV is home again. They host Henley out of Klamath Falls, Oregon, who are 0-1 after a 1-point loss to Crook County last week. How are the Falcons going to respond to this one? They are 1-0 with a good win over Trinity.
Well, the first half, I wouldn't say. If you take away the first half, I would say it was a good win. That first half was ugly for both sides of the ball in that Trinity-CV matchup. Just penalties galore. CV looked like they were in their first game. They had,
They were.
It was proven by the refs. I mean, there were flags all over the place, and they were slow to start. They only ran 10 real offensive plays in the first half, and yet they were up 29-24 at halftime. They got the big plays that when they needed it.
Well, that's what you expect. Going into the season, Matt Hunsaker, the Falcons head coach, said he had a young team, so you can almost expect the first game jitters. So now the first game jitters are out of the way. What do you think CV has?
They have great running backs that can carry the load. Dylan Sindorf proved it that he can. 8 carries, 158 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Although he had a couple fumbles earlier in the game, mostly on the handoffs, just the exchanges, trying to get used to playing with each other in a game setting. That's a bad deal. But he took off for him. And Derek King stepped up big, got a touchdown pass, as well. Connor Silveria stepped up, and Cody Connor as well. And, those 3 kids, they can run the ball pretty well, and they proved that they could against Trinity. So it's going to be interesting to see what they can do against an out-area team like Henley.
That's 4 really good backs right there. And one thing about Sindorf, he is a big kid, 5'10", 215.
He's
in that fullback position in Hunsaker's wing T offense. And
he runs hard. He ran hard up against the tackles, and then and then he just busted out to the outside. He can break the big one, which he did 3 times against Trinity. I mean, 2 for 50 or more, and then the other one for 24 yards. So, I mean, he can bust that big one.
And that makes Stevie extra dangerous when they have a big physical fullback like that. And moving on to Anderson at Oroville. Anderson got some big plays against Enterprise, and now they face an Oroville team that lost 39-9 out of the gate to Wheatland at home. This could be the first win of the Tim Patterson era, could it?
It could. It could very much. I believe Anderson won this game last year under Lance Gosh. And judging by what Anderson did against Enterprise on a couple of those big plays, they look like, they got some first game jitters out of the way, but their offense was still able to get those big plays, and that could more big plays are to come for the Cubs, and especially against a weak Oroville team.
I'm briefly looking at for Anderson. They host Las Pumas last week, but then the schedule gets tougher. They're at Foothill, at Winders, home against Sutter, and at Corning over the next 4 games. So these next 2 weeks, if they have any designs to make the playoffs in Tim Patterson's first season, they got to knock out these victories over Oroville and Las Pumas.
I agree. These big D1 schools, they gotta get those wins for those playoff points.
Okay, Corning is at Orland, and Mazama is at Wairika for the other NAL games. Now we'll switch gears to the small schools, and one school you wanted to throw a shout out to was UPrep, 72-22 over Weed, 18-game losing streak. History is a new era for the Panthers.
That is, I actually predicted UPrep to go into this game and win. I didn't think it was going to be by 50 points. Considering they've only scored, 46 points during their 18-game losing streak, and they scored 72 in this game against Weed. That's quite a bit of a difference. This Kyle Shanuth quarterback, and they got Robbie Lavolsi at running back and John Lee. These guys can turn around, and this game at Bernie is a very winnable game for UPrep. They could start 2-0 after losing their last 18.
They actually lost Maloon, which would have been their opponent next week, but they folded their varsity program. And then when UPrep's at Biggs in 2 weeks, so suddenly if they could head into league play at Durham on the 30th of September, 3-0, so suddenly going from losing streak to winning streak and trying to making playoffs, quite a reversal for the Panthers.
What a turnaround.
We're going to now Arcata at Trinity. The Wolves, they suffered that tough loss to Stevie. You talked with Jamie Green a little bit afterwards. What was his mentality?
He was disappointed. He was disappointed that, some penalties hurt him, and just sheer numbers, they got tired. And, that's going to happen when their workhorse, Luke Kern, the running back, middle linebacker, plays every single down, including special teams. So, he had over 100 yards in the first half against CV, but it came at a costly for him because he got tired, and he got tired real quickly, and they just couldn't pick their heads up from that.
They're going to need to find ways to rest Kern. He is their workhorse, but they need to find other guys, and they usually do have other guys. Weinzinger is a very good quarterback with a strong arm, and they have a couple other good running backs. They're facing an Arcade team that didn't have a varsity program last year, but here's this information. They won last week 18-12 over Illinois Valley out of Cade Junction, Oregon. That broke Arcata's own 18-game varsity losing streak. And just to toss some more fire under the Wolf belly, their last win was September 12, 2008, 31-22 over Trinity.
Well, there you go.
Okay. Moving on, we have Mount Shasta and Hidden Valley. And Mount Shasta, they're 0-2. They got knocked around. But all you need to know about Hidden Valley, they lost 60-9 at Del Norte last week. So the Bears could get their first win. Also, we have Modoc at Lakeview. And we'll have also an interesting game is Fall River at Chester. Now, Fall River, they look like they're back in the swing of things after a 36-6 win over Bernie a couple of weeks ago. They even got some first place votes in our the northern section media poll. But they faced a Chester team that beat Quincy 19-0 last week. Now, the Volcanoes, they don't have many players, but they have a lot of skilled players back. And the MODOK coach, Sean Wood, said you cannot sweep on them. So this could be an interesting test for Fall River early on.
Especially with the Chester team that knocked off Quincy, who received a lot of first-place votes. Was high in that category. As one of the top returning teams there to get back to where they were last year. So this is a big test for Fall River. Coming off of Bernie isn't that high of a win, obviously, but this could be a big early season test for the Bulldogs.
Well, rounding out the 11-man schedule for Friday, we have St. Mary's and Medford at Etna and Los Molinos at Weed. And before we sign off, we'll give a shout-out to the 8-man football games this week. Princeton at Hayfork, Loyalton at Liberty Christian at Foothill High School, Reading Christian at Champion Christian on Thursday, and Big Valley at Elk Creek. Now, what are your thoughts about Hayfork? They beat Greenville 36-14. They're taking on a Princeton team that lost to Dunsmuir 47-14. Those may be the two teams that could duke it out for the California North 8-man division title. So it could be an interesting test. You think Hayfork still can three-peat?
You always have a chance in 8-man football.
That is true. Okay, well, that's all for our show this week, and we will be back next week to talk about Week 3 and also give a brief recap of Week 2. So for TJ, this is Jeffrey Jen signing out.